And we're here today to talk about creating category kings, which I'm super excited about personally. And I know that David is as well. So I thought David and I would be the perfect guys to be shooting questions at L, and also, of course, joining in with our perspectives. Before we get started, I just want to say a few words about the European VC, so you know the context, and then afterwards also introduce David and Al, and they'll say a few words about themselves. I don't want to give too much away with my poor introductions, and then we'll pass it to Al Ramadan to do a nice presentation of what's new and hot in category design. And then we'll pass into a conversation with David Peterson, focusing a bit on David's experience building or designing the category with Airtable. And of course, also talking about all his very exciting work being done at Angular Ventures now. And Al will be joining in this conversation as the all-knowing oracle. So that's going to be super cool. All pressure on you, Al. So good. Okay, let me just share my screen, guys. This is the government-mandated presentation of the European VC. We're not allowed to do these presentations without running you through what we believe is the most important thing in the world, ourselves. So what are we doing? We're democratizing access to European VC. What does that mean? That means that we're trying to help everyone get access to venture funds in Europe because we're in a situation where that's not available to anyone. The minimum ticket to invest into a VC fund in Europe is 100,000 euros. We're bringing that down to 1,000 euros. So that's what we're basically doing our event in the investment club. And of course, we pick the best ones, and we can only do that because we get access through our network and community. So that means when we invite you guys to invest with us, I don't ask mom and pops to invest with us. I ask people from the community, people who actually live and breathe venture and startups. And when you come in as operator LPs, as we term it, then you can actually add value to the GP team and thus also the startups. You can do scout work, you can do value add work. And of course, you can also act as an expert advisor. If, for example, you love everything about creating category kings, then that's also what you can do. Yeah, so this is the profile of our members: VCs, operators, founders, angels, ecosystem players. We love you guys, so join us. We'll bring you together, and we've got some pretty cool deals for you, we believe. We've launched the first 3. One is 500 Istanbul and is Huli. We love this guy and his team. They're doing amazing things. Then we've got Pace Notes, which is a fund of fund. They're investing in the top tiers. So that's a bit not what we normally do, which is emerging managers. But Pace Notes and Jalan are a team of emerging managers. So in that sense, it fits right in the middle, and it's very focused on then providing access to the best so that you can learn from them, which is what we think is very interesting in that deal. And then we've got Acrobat Ventures, which is investing in Eastern European founders, and they've got an amazing track record, and we couldn't imagine a better team to be backing right now, and whatever's going on in that region. They are actually headquartered in Amsterdam and Kiev, so they're right in the hot seat, and are doing amazing work, also doing fundraisers and so on. So if there's a team to back these days, I believe that it's the ones that are helping out in that situation. And I don't want to bore you too much with this, so let's get on with the show. I'm sure that G/David will share with you a link to our Substack, so you can follow us there and see what we're doing. Now, normally we would have had a lot more fun if David was here, because then he would have made it less of a run-along dialogue from my side, a monologue. But instead, to make up for that, I will invite Al to tell us a lot more about himself and PlayBigger.
Hey everybody, great to be here. And for those of you who don't know me, my name's Al, and I'm the founder and CEO of a company called PlayBigger. We wrote this book here, PlayBigger. That's the Japanese and the Chinese version sitting underneath it. It's been super successful worldwide, and I hope you've had a chance to look at it. But I wanted to just take you through a few things today on current state category design. And actually, what I'm going to share with you today is actually something I shared with one of our partners just recently. And hopefully, it'll be a good indicator of what we think about when we think about category design. And category design itself is a new discipline. It's something we talked about in the book. It's definitely evolving, and there's many category designers around today. And it's built around this notion that we call category science. And we talked about this in the book, and if you've read this, some of you will be familiar with this. But it's this idea that categories themselves evolve over time. And usually the x-axis here is somewhere between 10 and 15 years for a B2B or an enterprise company, as they're sometimes called. And market cap is on the y-axis on the left, and the number of vendors is on the right. And so this brings all of those concepts together. And the idea is that categories in the early stages, maybe 3 or 4 years, in the first phase, there's lots of different companies all talking around or similar problems using different language. And then eventually 1 or 2 or 3 companies kind of emerge with the scope of the problem right, the definition of the problem that engages sort of people, and people feel like, oh my God, I've got that problem, I've got to have a solution. And that's in the develop phase, and that's when 1 or 2 or 3 companies kind of show up as the leaders. And then the dominate phase is where one company ultimately takes 76% of the market cap of the entire category. And that's what we call the category life cycle. And you see in the early phases lots of vendors. As you go into the dominate phase, one company takes it all and everyone's fighting over the scraps. And these categories themselves evolve over time. And if I put this in full screen, this would probably be better for you guys. Sorry about that. And this is sort of the CRM category, well-known category. Actually started forming back in 1980 around this category called contact management. And 2 companies, Act and Goldmine, were those companies that defined contact management as the idea that you actually took these printed or Rolodex files and put them into a PC. And if I wanted to talk to Andreas, I'd look up his name and I would start dialing his number. Brock Systems came along and created a new category out of contact management called Salesforce Automation. And it was this idea that we started to add context to those contacts, and those conversations are being essentially recorded or captured. And so we had much better understanding of what the funnel looked like. They invented the term funnel around the Salesforce Automation. Tom Siebel, one of the great category designers, came in and said, yep, Salesforce Automation and funnels and all that stuff are vital, but so is field, and so is customer support, and the rest of the, if you like, the customer journey. And that drove, and you can see the pink curve, the pink lines here are the market cap of the category at that particular point in time. And it drove a giant sort of evolution from Salesforce into CRM. Benioff came along and did one of the most brilliant moves of category design ever. He said, yes, it's about CRM, but it's not about client server CRM. He created a word called on-prem software. It did not exist before he created it. And it was sort of like cancer or a cigarette. It was a bad thing. And it then pushed client server CRM into the background. Cloud CRM took off, and this was as of 2014. Now it's in the hundreds of billions. But the idea here, and the important thing is, the timelines, you can see them along the bottom. There's sort of 10 or 15 year sort of categories at that point in time, as well as one tends to evolve out of the other around either a technology disruption, cloud, or PCs in the case of Act and Goldmine, or behavioral shift. They tend to be the drivers for the merge from one category to the next. Categories definitely evolve out of previous categories. And so some examples here. This is a great company that we worked with, Provo-based in Utah. Ryan Smith is the CEO, and the company's name is Qualtrics. And when we first met with them, they were in the market or the survey or the market research category. It was a $2 or $3 billion category. It was a very fine category. The company was doing incredibly well. It was profitable, but they knew that there was something a lot bigger that they were doing. And our job as the category designers was to try and understand what that was and help them define it and then ultimately own it. And one of the things you do with category design is you truly get to understand the problem. And so we asked the question of the entrepreneurs, well, what problem do you solve? And they say, well, we solve the market research problem. That is to say, we can design surveys that get at what people are thinking. It's like, okay, that's pretty cool, but like, what does the get at thinking thing actually do? And it's like, well, it's measuring sentiment. Okay, sentiment for what? And ultimately, if you go through this question and process a little bit more, you realize, oh my gosh, they're measuring this thing, which is really hard to measure, called experience. And it's not only for customers, but it's for employees of a brand or of a product and so on. And so we eventually centered on a category called experience management. And this is retrospectively looking. I'm going to show you a couple that are a little bit more wet paint in a minute. But what happened was Qualtrics created XM as it became known. It created X data, and this whole idea of experience management. They actually went public for somewhere around $30 billion. And one of the and all great category designers do what Ryan Smith did, which is pound on the problem. He continues to pound on the same problem, which is that you believe you're delivering a superior customer experiences, but 8% of your customers agree. And the discipline of pounding on this problem is so important. A lot of technology companies sort of start talking about how fast they are, or speeds and feeds and all that sort of stuff. Unless you connect with an individual about the problem that they feel, you're not going to truly become a category king. So Experience Gap was his thing. This is some creative that we did early in the process. This is like 2017. It was his idea of, for all of the executives out there, they needed to close the experience gap, to find X being X data, this magic data that gives you an understanding of how people are feeling about multiple parts of your company. They went on to create X4, which was their conference, 3-day masterclass in experience management. They had incredible people. Like, this is hard to believe, but 3 years after we launched the category, created the category, Oprah, President Barack Obama, Sir Richard Branson, many other people got up and talked about the importance of experience and what it means for their constituents and why it should matter for you. I mean, it's a remarkable story. XM, these are artifacts from the S1, which is the filing for an IPO here in the United States. XM, they actually named the category, the ticker symbol for the company became XM, just like Benioff did back in 2004 for CRM. The top of the material here is the blueprint, as we call it in our book, and as we call it in our consulting. There's this idea of presenting a solution for the entire category, whether you've got it all or not. And at the bottom is the timeline. And they, like I said, they ended up 51% at 27.3 billion. Here's another example. I got two more for you real quick. This one is a very exciting company based out of Germany. We're thrilled with this company. It started in what was called process mining. It's this idea that you could understand where the breaks were in processes. But as we got into this one, same kind of thing. It's like, well, okay, well, what does understanding the breaks in the process truly mean? And of course, it means superior execution. And ultimately, we call this category execution management. And it's a remarkable company. They're on an insane journey. It's a massive category for sure. And, it's very much wet paint. This is still underway. And the way they presented their problem was that companies are not executing at their full capacity. So as opposed to a sort of explicitly a gap, was this whole notion of capacity and the idea that, customer service, finance, or supply chain was just not where it should be. And you needed to unlock that execution capacity, processes running through multiple different systems, sometimes hundreds of different applications. Which is just remarkable for this poor thing called a process, which was invented back in the 20s, I guess. So they created this and introduced this whole new solution, i.e. category, called Celonis Execution Management. This is Alex, one of the great entrepreneurs in Germany, standing up and presenting his blueprint for the future. Of course, it has the core mining engine in the middle, but it also has a lot more around it now. And this is Harlazine, who was the chief product officer at the time, actually launching a set of products from that particular blueprint at the time of what we call their lightning strike. Alex did this really cheeky thing for the lightning strike where he put a full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal saying, you know, let's find $10 million trapped in your business. If we can't find it, we're going to donate $100,000 to your charity of choice. It was an incredibly provocative, and ultimately they, you know, probably 9 months, 12 months, something like that, after we completed the category design, launched the category of execution management, they had a remarkable raise where they raised $1 billion at 11 billion valuation. And this one is hot off the press. I mean, we literally just finished the strike. It was based in London, actually. It was the Economist had a conference called Innovation at Work. And this is where we launched this new category called collaborative intelligence. And this idea that, you know, the world is fundamentally changing. And as we got to understand what it was that Mural, in this particular case, the company was doing, we understood that, yeah, they had digital whiteboards and collaboration, all that. Yes, they were all necessary ingredients for sure, but there was something much more that you need to truly transform an enterprise in this work from home world, or this new hybrid world, or whatever you call this, where we're fundamentally disconnected from each other. Everyone has this sense of disconnection, and we need to build in collaborative intelligence into the way we collaborate together. That is to say, not to leave it to chance, but truly to design collaboration. That's the category we just launched a few days ago. This is Mariano Suarez Batan. He's the CEO. And this is him at the Innovation at Work at Global Week just last week, launching his new point of view, as we call it, this problem of disconnection. Very poignant. The image here is actually from an amazing Ukrainian artist who has created this incredible sculpture with people being disconnected, and it speaks so much to what's happening inside of enterprises, of course, across the world as well. They launched create the collaborative intelligence category so that teams can literally do anything, and they actually published their blueprint. As you see a theme through this, that every time you launch a category, you've also got to launch the solution. In this particular case, the Mural blueprint, which starts with the collaboration space, i.e. the digital whiteboard is in the middle, quite obviously, but then you've got a lot more that you need to do. You need to be able to learn how to actually design collaboration, like the steps or the methods or the workflows that you should use that really does break down disconnection or creates connection and ultimately leads to better outcomes for business. They have collaborative insights. You know, collaboration insights, as they call it, allows you to understand who's collaborating with who, both inside your organization and across the boundaries of organizations, and a whole bunch more. And just finally, those three examples are examples of what we call this new discipline called category design. And these are the fundamental building blocks. If you've read the book, you will understand that, first of all, you've truly got to understand this founding insight. Most great entrepreneurs have this burning desire to solve a problem, something that they see that others don't. And we need to get at that problem. Like, truly, what is that problem you are trying to solve? The category name, of course, is the name of the solution or the product category. You need to give it a definition. You just saw three examples of that: XM, EMS, or execution management systems, and collaborative intelligence that we've created. Then you've got to create a blueprint and an ecosystem, a visual that describes how this works and who are the parties that play in. You've got to create a point of view that's emotional, that's different, that explains what problem you solve and why it matters to a target audience. Then you have to mobilize. So the first four are the sort of the strategy piece. Then you have to mobilize a company. This is the execution piece to actually launch the category, the point of view, the blueprint, your offer to this target market. And we use this discipline or methodology we call a lightning strike, which is to truly execute a concentrated strike. So if you were in the Mural target audience, you will have at least felt that Mural existed on that day, and that they empathized with this problem of disconnection that you have. So that is the end of the, if you like, the formal presentation. It's a setup. And what I did want to say was that, category design, the discipline we just talked about, sits around two other really important disciplines. One's called company design, sales and marketing, sort of sales structure, go to market, human resources, all of the pieces that sort of make a quote company great. And it also sits around product design, the idea that there's a solution that's actually designed in a way that solves problems. So category, company, and product are those three pieces that come together. We call it the magic triangle in the book. And David Peterson's had tons of experience in other parts of that as well as category design, and I'm sure we're going to really enjoy hearing what he has to say on this topic.
Yeah, and I think that Al kicked it perfectly to you, David. So feel free just to first of all say a few words about yourself and now an Angular, and then also your story coming in, and then focus on your journey with creating the category.
Yeah, absolutely. Al, thank you so much for the layup and the introduction. It's and super interesting presentation as well. I'm really excited to discuss it more. And hey everybody, my name is David Peterson. So I'm currently one of the partners at Angular Ventures. We're a first check VC firm. We're based in London, invest across the UK, Europe, and Israel. And we invest in enterprise B2B deep tech companies. So that's kind of the high level on Angular. Now, me personally, I am an investor now. I've been an investor for about 6 or 7 months, but I'll be honest, I kind of wear the investor hat somewhat uncomfortably still. I'm somewhat new on this side of things. I've really been an entrepreneur and early stage guy for my whole career to date. So this is a little bit new. On the operator side of things, I've spent all of my time in the enterprise world. Bootstrapped a company of my own. I was the first early employee and led growth at a B2B marketplace that scaled across the US. And then I was the first first growth person and very early employee at Airtable, where I kind of built the first growth team, then built the partnerships org and a bunch of other go-to-market strategy stuff, and worked a lot on. So we'll talk certainly about category design. We worked on that. We thought about that a lot. I'll be for the first to say, I don't think we actually succeeded at category design just yet, and I can tell you why. I think that, and some lessons learned from our mistakes and everything, but worked on a lot of that stuff and go-to-market system building, in general. So that's my high-level experience, and happy to talk through the Airtable story, as much as I can, and also kind of. I've been thinking a lot about how, category design can be, how it translates to being a VC, and being, coming to the investment side, and what lessons I can take, from that experience, both as an investor and as somebody who is now building a new type of business, right? Like a VC firm is its own type of business that I think, requires you to, in some ways, maybe create a category for yourself.
For sure. David, let's just, first of all, to everyone listening in, David is being very modest when he says he's joined the VC and he's new in he's new in things, because David joined on partner level in Angular Ventures, which is definitely one of Europe's best up and coming firms out there. So I don't think that...
you said it. Yeah, I couldn't be the one to say it, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, but David, I do think let's open up the box a bit. Tell us your journey with category design. Feel free to dive in the beginning, how you think about it first as a founder.
Yeah, sure. Really, so happy to kind of tell, or share as many stories from the Airtable days, as possible that'll be useful to folks. And so please, ask lots of questions. You can dig in on things. I'll try to do my best to lay it all out. For one question I actually have just in general is, maybe for you guys, is, have you used Airtable before? Do you have a sense of the product? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But do describe it. We may
Cool.
have some,
Yeah. I'll
who
describe it too.
yeah.
But if anything, this reveals the first challenge that we had, which is Airtable is a really hard product to describe. So I'll try to describe it right now. But I can tell you, after working there for 4+ years, I didn't get much better at describing it in all those years. It's a hard product to talk about. So I mean, if you haven't used it before, it kind of looks like a spreadsheet, but it actually is a database. It lets you, it empowers you to build lots of new things, right? You can build, what we would always say is you can build, it enables you to build software, right? Now the challenge with that we faced at Airtable is that it was really hard to talk about what Airtable actually was. Like, it was hard to describe it in a way that was immediately resonant with people. And I think that's when we kind of realized that we almost had to create a category, like, if we were going to succeed, because there was we needed to create the language by which we could even talk about what we were building. And almost as a result, we spent a lot of time talking about, to Al's point about, you really need to talk about the problem, like identify the problem. Don't talk about features, right? Don't talk about the problem. I think almost just because we didn't have the words to describe Airtable, we spent a ton of time just talking about the problem and what a solution could and should look and feel like. And we spent very little time talking about Airtable's specific solution because we had no words to describe the specific solution anyway. Like, the features were not useful to highlight. So almost like inadvertently, I think we were kind of executing on some best early practices for category design. So what did that look like for us in particular, though? When people would ask, what does Airtable do? Like, what I would say is, well, let me ask you first, like, what do you do? What's your job? And then based on what you'd say, I'd reply, okay, here's something we've seen a lot. A lot of our customers, they'll tell us about how they've built systems, complex duct tape together systems using existing rigid software, plus some spreadsheets, plus maybe email to manage their work. They built these complex systems themselves. These are always suboptimal. But all these customers, they always have a vision for, like, the ideal system that they love to build. They wish they could build this system, but they just don't have the technical skills to do it themselves. So they're stuck. And maybe what they want to build is like that perfectly constructed content calendar to manage their, million+ reader blog. Maybe it's that combined product roadmap, user research hub, the CRM, all combined to build your, to find product market fit when you're early stage startup. Whatever it is, Airtable gives you the tools to build the system that's in your head that you've never been able to build before, right? Like, that is how we would talk about Airtable, because we didn't have the words to describe the product itself. So we had to describe the problem, and we described use cases. And yeah, we were kind of like forced into that, and I think over time we realized that, and one thing I'll note is that, that had an impact on that understanding of the problem and understanding of how to talk about it, had an impact on our marketing strategy, our go-to-market system, go-to-market strategy, our product strategy, everything. Like, the entire company was kind of oriented around that way of thinking about the problem. So when Al talks about this, triangle of category creation, that totally resonates, because it's seeped into every, like, facet of the company.
I think we could actually dive in on that. So what does that mean very concretely? And Al, feel free to pitch in on that. What does it mean to be focused on the problem in every facet of the business? What does that mean in the growth team? What does it mean in the product dev team? What does it mean at the board level, now you being a VC?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, Al, please.
There you go. I got some thoughts, but go.
Okay, yeah, I'll give it a first shot, and then I would be really interested to hear what you would think.
Yep.
So I mean, for us, like as an example, on the go-to-market side, there were a few kind of downstream effects of that. So we understood the problem to be what I kind of described up top, which is people are doing work with suboptimal systems that they have duct taped together. They have an idea in their head for the ideal system. They just don't have the tools to build it. We can give them those tools. You know, we can give them the Lego blocks to build the kind of perfect tool or perfect system they've always wanted. So that's kind of our idea of the problem. Given that, you know, our marketing from the very early days was oriented around it was oriented around aspirational use cases, right? It was oriented around showing people both how they could put the Lego blocks together and other people building with these Lego blocks and other, like, you know, inspirational ideas. So that's like the template gallery, which Airtable is, you know, famous for, or you know, like all of the educational content we built was all oriented around that type of problem. We launched this thing called Airtable Universe, which is a way for anybody to publish the things that they had built so they could kind of show off what they built. It was oriented around the same idea. And you could say the same thing from a go-to-market kind of system design point of view, is thinking about who we hired, or and the jobs to be done of those people. The early hires on the go-to-market side were all customer success, education. It was all oriented around helping people succeed, helping people build, you know, rather than hiring sales reps to close deals early on, right? So just two examples to kind of highlight.
Very good point in that. And that's also why we see that that's often the tech route, right? Customer success teams comes much earlier than in most other types of businesses.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
I think so.
Al, feel free to jump
Yeah, I think what David said was great, sort of practical examples of how this shows up, this category design itself. The definition of the problem, as you saw with, you just use the Qualtrics example, is even more explicit than what David was talking about, right? It's at probably one level above that. And it's ironic, I think I didn't realize this until now, but we've been working on the Airtable category design here for the last 4 or 5 months with Howie and Archana and Stephanie and all that sort of stuff. And so I got a little bit of insight, and I have to be careful my inside voice and outside voice doesn't get confused here, because we haven't launched the category just yet. But so this concept of taking all of the things that you've said and what we've heard a lot of from Airtable in that particular case is this idea of sort of disconnected systems is really sort of at the core of the problem, right? Exactly to David's point that, you know, as a result of sort of the massive change that sort of happened in the pandemic, and where we're having all enterprises end up pushing sort of strategy and resources and systems to the edge of the enterprise. You had to, because like that's just how you had to adapt to not having quote a headquarters, right? That's what's happened over the last 2 or 3 years. So the beauty of that is you've got all of these really refined bespoke systems. The problem is they're all disconnected, right? And they've got spreadsheets in between them and who knows what else, right? So so being more explicit about that problem at a higher level is really powerful. And that's what category design essentially forces you to do, is to have one statement like the experience gap or execution capacity or disconnection or the state of disconnection of people, which is where the mural company needs to go. So I'd encourage you to take all of the amazing work that David and CS teams, which typically are great proxies or representatives for the problem, and actually get that sort of elevated to the thing, right? And then to your point, that flows down. It flows down into the product. If you're not solving that problem, you shouldn't be writing any code. If you're not selling that problem, you know, you're selling a feature, you're going to be, you know, commoditized against some other competitor. So don't do that. Sell the problem, engage with the people who have these disconnected systems issues. And then once you've got them leaning in, it's like, you know what, I have got that disconnected system. Yeah. Then you need something to David's point, to connect them. And so that would be on the solution side, i.e. the product side, as well as on what we call the blueprint. So you need to publish essentially that visual that shows what are all the pieces that you need. David said it pretty well, which is build the perfect system, build that system that you need to solve your particular problem, right? So they are just examples of how it affects the product organization, how it affects the sales organization. Of course, marketing is going to draft off of all of that work. It's going to be like, well, we have to elevate this problem, this disconnected systems problems in the minds of those people who have it. And so that's a lot of what our lightning strike and campaigns would be. So yeah, it has a knock on to everything. And some people, look, honestly, we sometimes get the question of, we used to get it a lot. We don't get it so much anymore, but we used to get the, how is this different to brand? Is like a question that comes up a million times, right? And it's like asking the question of how is a pizza different to ice cream? I mean, they're so different, right? It's not a different kind of pizza or anything like that. It's freaking ice cream. And it's this branding tends to end up downstream from category design. Once you've figured out what problem you're solving, once you figured out the solution, then you can start to talk about you. But until you've done the work up there, you got no right to be talking about you before you talk about the problem. It's so far removed from category design itself. It ends up being an important part of the lightning strike, and branding often gets tweaked when we do a strike. So yeah,
I have a few questions now. And
yes.
Can I just
yeah, fire away. No, we should go.
Right, yeah, and I'm sure we'll talk more about Airtable stuff and whatever, but just have a few thoughts that brought to mind. One thing is, I've often, so I think you're so right that you need to be able to have a name, right? And it needs to be a short name, right? And that is something we never succeeded at, which, it's so funny that you guys are working together. So now very clearly that we did not succeed at that because you're trying to help them do it now. So yeah, we definitely did not succeed at that. But something else I always felt like you needed was an enemy. Like you need to have something on the other, something to differentiate yourself clearly from. And the story of Salesforce that you told is such a good one, with like Siebel being like the clear enemy, and there's so many stories about that. So I'm curious if you think that is true. Is that a necessary precondition to successfully creating a category? Do you need an enemy to differentiate yourself from, or is that just kind of like an added bonus?
I think it's an added bonus more. I mean, truly the enemy is the problem, and it's the enemy is the ramifications of having that problem. So for example, in the case of, let's just take Salonis as an example, right? Execution capacity is the problem, right?
Yeah.
The enemy is inefficient finance, inefficient supply chain, inefficient whatever else. So in that sense, it kind of can go there. We had a company called Sensity Systems, and we did exactly what the Benioff move, which was, and they retrofitted LED bulbs into light poles. You probably don't know this, but there's 2 billion light bulbs around the world, and they have the best vantage point of planet Earth than pretty much anything other than the satellite has. And so what we did there was we made these dumb poles the enemy, which is just a light. Because when you put a light in, you can put sensors like video or CO2 or whatever, movement, sound, whatever. And so in your sense, like we did with Benioff, we made the enemy a dumb pole so that you went, oh, we got to solve the dumb pole problem to be a smart, intelligent system. We call it light sensory network in that particular case. In the case of Benioff, because Benioff was trying to put what we call a modifier in front of an existing category, then you have to start to pick a different kind of fight. He chose to do his category design that way. In the case of, cloud CRM, as opposed, it was just called CRM before that, right?
Yeah.
You probably don't remember this, but before that it was called ASP, and before that it was like, there was a whole bunch of things before it got to kind of cloud CRM, right? And so once he did that, he then had to alienate, the fact that every CRM implementation from Siebel never got finished. You can't. It's like on-prem software. And we say it now today as if it's, it's part of. But he invented all of that, right? He did the incredible stunts for his lightning strike, where he would go along to the Siebel and Oracle shows, to the user conferences, and he would protest software.
Yeah. No, totally.
I remember that. Like,
of course,
that's just outrageous. But what he was doing was he was making enemy out of sort of, if you like, software that ran on your computer,
Yeah.
on your desktop, I should say, as opposed to something that ran inside of a browser. I mean, that's essentially what he was doing. I think you'd have to say that Mark was the one who did create the cloud, like
Right.
the
As a
lexicon,
category.
right? As a
Absolutely.
Uber category, and then cloud CRM underneath it. I think you have to make that
Yeah.
case. Right?
And I do think that there was so I think you're right that you don't need an enemy it doesn't need to be a person or another company, but it
Right.
feels like in Salesforce's example, there's a huge benefit to there being a clear face to the enemy, right? The enemy was the enemy, yes, is on-prem software, which he also invented as a category. He's like a multi-category king. He creates a category just to destroy it with his new category. Like it's kind of amazing. I think it's useful that Siebel was like the face though, like that. I feel like he benefited from that. And this is also making me think because this is something we thought about a lot at Airtable is we almost felt like we didn't deserve to to create a category until our feature set caught up. We had a big vision that we were executing on, but the roadmap was years long, and we knew we knew where we were going to get, and and at that stage we were like, yeah, we can create a category then, but until then we felt like we didn't deserve it. It would feel presumptuous, and I wonder if I wonder how you react to that. Was that a fair, reaction to us, or were we just being wimps? Should we have gone for it really early?
Yeah, I think you were being wimps, but hey,
I kind of think so too, to be honest. But
seriously, and here's what I'd say. So, I remember the first time I met Ryan Smith, and Ryan Smith is not a wimp. He is at the other end of the spectrum. He's incredibly brave and bold, and he's willing to get out over the front of his skis, as we say it. And the thing that used to piss him off more than anything else in the world, is when people started calling him Survey Monkey on steroids.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a little bit of what happened with Airtable. It's like, oh yeah, it's a spreadsheet on steroids.
Spreadsheet on
It's
steroids.
like, it should drive you crazy. Someone saying you're in that category over there, but you're on steroids. It's like ESPN Plus. It's such a stupid thing to do. Like, why don't you call it what it is?
Yeah.
Not plus. It's just because you haven't got the imagination to define the category. That's what it is. And so, to answer your question, yes, you win.
So real. So real. Yeah.
Absolutely right.
I do think that it's a super good point, and I think that it's something that, it's reflecting on the topic of VCs, in relation to all of this, right, David? That's also the role of VCs, I see, right? That you've got these founders, many of them are first-time founders, and they're building something that is larger than themselves, and they need to come to terms with, it's okay to say to everyone, I am disrupting whatever existing categories out there, or I'm building, and then they say something that seems larger than life.
Well, yeah, I just say one thing before David says. So, when to sort of what WIMP turns into, or how you can change the way you approach this, is you have to have the confidence that the problem you're solving is big enough, and that the future, the solution is still a little over the horizon. It's just always going to be like that, all right? And that's a little bit. I'm reading David's mind a little bit here. This is the first time we actually met, so
Yeah.
but I can feel it. And in the case of Ryan Smith, they had a tool, market research, but they had a number of quote use cases: customer experience, employee experience, product experience, brand experience. They had a number of different sort of domains that tool was being used in. What he chose to do was package the tool, or talk about the tool as it should be, more as a platform, and then build applications that spoke to customer, brand, product, employee, right? So when he launched on day one, he said the blueprint, if you remember seeing that picture, I can show it to you again if you'd like to see it. When that blueprint got shown, and I'm just going to bring it up right now. Give me 2 secs. Yeah, here it is here. Just to remind everyone what we're actually talking about. So this is the blueprint picture here. This top right-hand corner, can you see that? This is the blueprint that got published. all of the if you see my cursor, this is where the essentially the tool showed up more as the platform, and then he built products or applications is probably a better way to say it for each of the different areas or use cases. That's how you're not being a wimp, because that's how you say, we've got a really powerful platform, and B, we've actually got experiences that actually product applications, I should say, that speak to the sort of the core. He calls it the four corners of the business. Now, the truth is that blueprint that you see there, which was first drawn, I can show you the original drawing in 2016, didn't show up as a set of applications until 2019. And that's the whole point. That's the whole point is when you start to define the category in that way, and you start to create a blueprint for the category, you're talking about a solution for the entire category and not just for you, and that you can then fill into it, right? And that's where a lot of product founders especially get sort of hung up. They're like, oh no, we can't talk about anything until it's already rolled out. It's like, bullshit, you can't. You absolutely can. And you should. Because that's when the C-level executives, if you don't, this is what happens. Your Medallia, who's competing against, or SurveyMonkey, who's competing against Qualtrics, the day after the lightning strike, what happens? The sales guy goes in and says, hey, I know you're trying to measure experience of either your customers or your employees or the products or the brand, and we've got a solution for that. We've got these applications, and sure, if you want to develop one of your own, you can do that on top of the platform as well. And ultimately, they launched 50 different partners who had also had X applications, right? So the sales guy is in with a C-level person or a VP level person. The VP level person goes, oh my gosh, I can solve all of those problems. And then the Medallia sales rep goes in and says, we got the best CX solution in the world.
Yeah. Could I just...
And the customer says, well, that's cool, but like, where's your EX and BX and PX?
Yeah.
You're done. You're out.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's the beauty of the whole blueprint. That's the beauty of creating a vision of the future. That's the whole point. And that is a chasm that not all founders get across.
You know, it makes me also think about how, investors, I think, often give the feedback they've given to the market, and the feedback they give to founders is to stay really focused, right? And that's why super vertical, niche vertical SaaS is like the thing everybody wants to invest in, right? Because you can define it really carefully, you understand the market really well, you stay focused, you execute on this really clear roadmap and everything. And broadening out, building something more horizontal, everybody's kind of afraid of that. Airtable is that, right? It's super horizontal. There's a lot of other products that are, but those usually are, they don't get funded as quickly. People are, people are intimidated by something that is broad like that. But I feel like what you're describing, Al, is it's kind of like a broader level framework for how to build a horizontal platform, right? It's like the framework for building the category is the framework. Like if you can define the category, then actually how the product should expand over time, what should the different modules be? Like that is defined by the category itself. And that makes me think, like, from an investor point of view, you should be like, we should all be looking for category creators in the founders that we speak with, and also encouraging founders to think about, like, what is the higher level category? Like, let's zoom out 1 level, 2 levels, 3 levels from where you're building now, help define that category, because that also defines the roadmap and defines the market size and defines everything else too.
I'd just love to ask you, David, to reflect and Al, if you can also comment on it. But if we look at that blueprint that you had just before, Al, and we imagine an early stage pre-seed seed founder shows that to you as a VC, that this is the blueprint. And do you then think that, being truly honest with it, right? Do you think that, okay, this guy is nuts, because right now he's only solving that small part in the middle there, and then he has this vision of all this stuff around him. How would you justify that? How would you think through it as an investor?
I think it's a no, I think it's a great question, because I think we are often, trained as investors to think about, like, what is the we're trained to think about the narrow path to success. Like, what is the, you know, what are the, and it's even how we think about milestones, and how it's like, what are the few things we need to prove to get to the next round? What do we need to prove to get the seed? And then what do we need to prove to get to the A? And that I think that's great in so much as it helps with, especially early on when you're inventing something for the first time, you need to iterate. You need small steps. So that's really important. So what I would say is, if I'm looking at a blueprint, I want to see the milestones. I want to see, what's the thing that will cost $1 million and get us to this really close, next step that we can, and we'll de-risk the whole idea a little bit more, and de-risk and de-risk and de-risk. I want to see that, but I really want to see the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow too. Like, and that is the blueprint in my mind. And if those make sense together, then that is a dream scenario. And like, what you're looking for with a founder, I think, is somebody who can guide you through that maze. Because it's not obvious how you get from here to there, but if somebody is so all over it that they seem to see the future, and they understand, like, they know that this category should be created before anybody else does. They have some secret insight into the world, that I don't have and nobody else have. They have, like, that is, I feel like, what we're looking for.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, David. One thing I'd say is, you know, category design changes over time too. For a pre-seed to a Series B to a Series D, there's slightly different approaches that you have to take to get this solved. So don't for one second think what I'm saying about Qualtrics necessarily plays for a seed round. They sometimes do and sometimes don't, more often not. But what I'd say is the thing that always does is the scope of the problem is actually what the really savvy investors today think about. And because that then defines the category potential, and that then defines the TAM. And so a lot, the Brian Schreiers from Sequoias of the world, and some of the key people even, from latter stage ventures like Blackstone and everything else, that's what they really start to think about is, can I scope this problem in a way, or understand how that problem scope truly shows up inside of an enterprise? In the case of Airtable, for example, this whole idea of disconnected systems that's a giant scope. Like, you think about that. Yeah. That's back, you don't remember this, you're all too young, but I was writing code back in the 70s to solve that problem. They were called applications back then, right? Yeah. And so it was a development sort of problem. So, and that turned out to be a $100 billion, $1 trillion industry, over that period of time, right? Since the 70s. That's a lot of what Airtable does. It's just, you don't have to be a software engineer like I was. You can be anybody in business. You can so-called low code, sort of environments that enables you to build these, quote, what you said, with the perfect systems, right? So that's the thing that you've got to understand. And the great VCs understand that. They drill into, tell me about the problem scope. Then they go to, okay, so if that's the scope, what's the category potential? How big could this thing be? How many people, how many enterprises, how many, what's the value create, all of that stuff. And then you can get to TAM. And once you do that, and if you look carefully at the S1 from Qualtrics, it lays out that case exactly like that. And eventually you end up at a TAM of 60 billion. People don't even question it now. Yeah. At the time, I was like, wow, that's a big statement. $60 billion for experience management? Come on, mate. It doesn't exist.
And I think it goes very well to what you said as well, David, around because this is where you then tie it to the Series A and the seed and B and so on, because once you've described the story out here on the problem scope and so on, and then you get the TAM and all that, that is where you then need to tell, of course, the funding story that will get you to the point where you're allowed to go out on the IPO and say, okay, we have actually built all of this.
We've done this. Yeah. Do you think, I was just wondering, Al, do you think that, because in the stories you've been telling about category creation, the CEO is always in the center of that story, right? Certainly with Benioff, as we were talking about, but even Ryan Smith and Qualtrics, right, and all of these other examples. Do you think that is there something about the CEO that is again that you look for? You know, this is a CEO who can create a category. Is that something that I'm thinking now with my investor hat?
Yeah.
Is that something we should be looking for? Like, oh, this person is a,
It's funny you should mention it. So I'll broaden that question to being, we look at probably 250 different companies each year, and we do 4 or 5 category designs.
Oh, interesting.
So that's our business.
Yeah.
Okay. So then you might ask a question like, well, which ones do you invest in? What are the criteria for you selecting 250 down to 4? And the criteria are the CEO. So is he or she someone who can become the evangelist for the problem? That's number one. Number two, do we have an exec team that could pull this off, i.e. the solution side of this and go-to-market side of this, right? Number three is who are are there any other investors involved? Who are they, and all that sort of stuff. And then number 4 is the category potential. What do we think the potential for this thing could be? They're our 4 criteria. And when we do our intakes every quarter, Mary sits down with a spreadsheet or an Airtable. Actually, it is an Airtable. And she actually walks us through. She walks us through the whole thing. Yeah. Right? And so that's, and look, it's not just us. I can tell you this. There's 10 investors I know now in the United States who use a very similar kind of pre-screen on their companies, and they are the VCs who now are investing in categories and category creation.
And
they really are.
If any of our listeners don't know this, this is of course exactly why we're talking to Al today, and why we're talking about category design, because that's also what I have been feeling, at least, that everyone, or many of the people who are someone in Silicon Valley, they do throw out terminology from category design quite often. So being here with Al, I think is amazing for us. David,
hey, I was going to say, Andreas, there's one question that just came up, I think, on the which came from Stefan, which is we need a template like the business canvas model to build. So the answer is yes, there is. We have completed 60 category designs now. Mm-hmm. And not all of them have been glowing successes like the ones that I showed you. Some of them have been absolute failures. And we've learned a lot along the way. And so we are writing book number 2 now, which I'm hoping is going to be super helpful for this question, right? In book number 1, we definitely outline a process. And so you have to go from defining the problem through the solution stage, create a blueprint, point of view, lightning strike, like we're doing all of that. But the next book I'm hoping is going to talk to that. Having said that, what we've done as an organization in response to like the demand for category design, I explained before that we can't get to do all the ones we'd like to, is we've now chunked it up a little bit, and we have 3 different approaches to category design. One's called therapy. It's for Series C to Series A, B, somewhere in there. And it's a low cost, really fast, rapid way of helping you through 4 or 5 sessions to get to the answers to each one of these artifacts that you need in category design. Then there's an offering called go ahead.
Just because that's not openly available templates, right? Or books, or there's not a resource that's called therapy. That's a product that you have inside PlayBigger that people can request. Yeah, because I looked for it because I think we need it so direly.
Yeah, that's why we're writing the book. Like seriously, that is exactly why we're writing book 2, for that exact reason. We then have Activate, which is more for the Series B, C, and D, which is essentially empowering the internal category designer, and we are their essentially counsel, and we walk them through the whole process. They get access to all their templates and all that stuff, and ultimately have what we call Immerse, which is for the higher end. So the reason for mentioning that is just it's a giant sucking sound that we're hearing from the market. It's a problem that everyone wants to solve, and hopefully the new book and some of the new things that we have coming out. We do have a lot of stuff in our blogs and everything else. We've done open category designs with firms live for you to check in and see how we did it. We did one of those back in November, which was really well received. And so if you want more of that, just let us know. And I'm sure, either me or Jason or Ashley or any of the other category designers at PlayBigger would be happy to do that.
Okay, so we've got some questions from the audience that I'd like us to run through, and everyone feel free to shoot them, and then we'll try and get more through them now. But not right now. We've just had a very friendly bromance between David and Al, and I've loved that. So I didn't want to get too much in the way of that. But the first question here is someone asking if there's sometimes a difference between the framework of the category in technical terms versus its clarity in the customer's minds. So I think that's the question, right? So making it very obvious, that's what David talked about in the beginning, right? That sometimes you just see that you're attacking a problem that isn't very well understood by customers, and you're bringing a solution that's even worse or even harder to describe. So I guess Al and David, the clear question is that's exactly something that's just happened.
Yeah, I'd say that the problem speaks to the customer. The technical solution speaks to the solution or the answer, right? Yeah. And so if you think about category design, you have to evangelize the problem first, get the customers to acknowledge that they have that problem. Often it's a problem they don't know they have, or a problem that they don't think can be solved, as we talk about in the book, right? That's the nature of problems. Yeah. Uber, we didn't imagine you could solve standing on a corner in New York on a Friday night with raining, calling some dispatcher to finally get it, to actually pushing a button and the dude shows up in a black car. Like, we never imagined that, right? And so you have to become the evangelist for the problem of standing in New York with rain coming down, right? And then the technical solution is, oh, sure, there's going to be cars and mobile, applications in the driver and for the customer, like all of that stuff. And you have to match those two things in. The problem and solution come together, and the category is at the center of those things.
And I think tying this to the next question, which is about brand and brand positioning, I guess that's also when you are an early stage startup attacking a massive problem that people don't imagine can be solved, and you then go out there and say that you're solving it. That's also why you oftentimes find yourself needing to use big words. So the next question is, how do you differentiate the art of category design from the concept of brand positioning and building?
Yeah, so category design is about truly being the master of understanding the problem that you're solving and the person who has it. That's your job as a category designer, is to understand that before you understand anything else. Don't bother with anything else. Don't even talk to me until I know that stuff better than anybody else, until I can become the evangelist for that problem. David did a pretty good job with Airtable. Don't bother talking to me about brand. Like, what would it matter? Like, it's like something shows up in front of you if you've got no context. And we as human, we make decisions based on sort of biases. We can't look at RFPs for every marketing message we get. That's 2,000 or 3,000 a day, right? We just can't. And so the biases are sort of what's called the anchoring bias is the first one, which says, if David and I are negotiating over a car, he says 500. I know it's not 5,000 or 50, right? So it anchors the conversation. So your job as a category designer is to first of all anchor the problem in a way that's powerful. Then there's the social contagion biases, which is, well, if David likes it, then I like it. Then I like it before, so I should like it again. That's when brand starts to show up, when the third or the fourth bias actually shows up. They've already made a decision well before that on who solves the problem. And people get confused about, I need a new brand campaign. For what? Because I want a new logo? Yeah. Really? That's going to drive a whole bunch of growth in the company, a new freaking logo? No. What'll drive growth in a company is if you understand the problem, can articulate the problem, and get people to feel that problem. That's what drives it.
And I think that just to touch on that, as you've said very clearly as well in your book, category design isn't for everyone. So that means if you need a new logo and you're selling wine to normal people in Denmark, then by all means go ahead and get a new logo. Talk to a branding firm. But that's not what VC is about. And we see so many businesses that are practically just that. And feel free, but VC is about finding the ones that are creating a category, like we've seen with the companies that you've described, and as Airtable has done. And that's why I think it's so relevant to bring in a framework like this, because it gives us actually a framework to talk about what VC is about. Do you agree with that, David? I'm curious to hear you on that.
Yeah, I do agree with that, and I think that you know, I feel like actually maybe a useful analogy is thinking about paid marketing. If you're experienced with AdWords, let's say, so experienced with, you know, buying, you know, bidding on keywords, right? And, you know, maybe a way to think about it is if you're investing in branding or you're investing in positioning, really what you're doing is you're, you know, investing in branding means you're just like bidding more for a keyword that is already really competitive. And you might be able to get higher up the page, but that's all you're spending money on, right? All of that investment in brand, you're getting awareness, you're getting higher up on the page, but you're competing with a bunch of other people. And positioning is all about like, what is it, you know, on that landing page, if somebody clicks through, what are all the features that you're going to highlight versus your competitors? And how are you trying to differentiate yourself on these nitty-gritty details, right? Category creation is about owning a new keyword that nobody else owns yet, right? So it's going to be a huge upfront investment to own that keyword and to get people to search for it. But once people do, the cost per click is zero. You know, you own it. And that's the big benefit. I think a lot of people, and investors will give this advice, you know, they'll say, like, we need to invest in acquisition. We need to invest in brand so we can fill the top of funnel, right? And it's like, you want that to be, they're saying that because it's a math equation that is easy to understand, right? I know what the cost per conversion is, cost per acquisition, put some money in the top, I know what's going to come out the other side, right? So I, as an investor, can understand that. What you really need to be doing, though, is doing the much harder investment in category creation. The upside is way bigger, but that is risk capital. Like, that is what we should be doing, you know, investing in those types of scenarios.
Yeah, I'll give you an example of a company. David, you're spot on, and I wish I had have used that. My example is, you know, frozen foods is in every supermarket that we walk into today, right? And we all go down a frozen foods aisle and we buy frozen food. A guy invented that.
Right.
It wasn't like it didn't come from outer space. And we actually talk about that guy in our book. Anyone remember who it was?
It was
Clarence Birdseye, baby.
Yes, boom.
I remember.
Clarence Birdseye invented frozen foods. It's now in every freaking supermarket in every part of the world.
Yeah.
So
amazing.
That's the point. Is sometimes you think, oh my God, that category, you know, where did that come from? Someone invented every single category, people.
Yeah.
And your point about buying keywords and, you know, feature comparisons and position, like, yes, all important, way down in the tactical end of the spectrum. Unless you get this stuff up front right, you're going to get run over by a bus. Like you are. That's why 76% of the market cap goes to the one who leads, for exactly Dave's reason. It all accrues to the king.
But Al, you also had a special company mentioned in the book that invented a bunch of categories, but managed to fail in monetizing on any of them or owning any of them. I'd love to hear you just bring that story in, and then also reflect on what did they do wrong, because that's where you tie the category creation together with execution on actually winning the category.
Yeah, it often happens. Like, you know, it's the sort of the triangle again. It's like you can have a great category and no product, and zero is the answer. You can have a great category and no company to execute, i.e., sales, marketing, human resources, blah blah. Zero is the answer, right? It's not like, oh, it's just one thing. It's not like a magic bullet. It's all three have to come together, which is why for us, when we do our intakes, we're looking for the company, what the company executive is a proxy for, have we got sort of like a team, and then the product question of, do we have a product that actually is selling and working, is the sort of the key. And so we want to know that those two axes are strong, so that if we do build on the category side, you get the three of those things. And any one of those things being broken means you will not succeed. So we're not saying this is more important than product design. We are not saying that. We're not saying this is more important than company design. We're not saying that either. We're just saying it's as important, and you need all three.
Yeah, yeah. And if you don't pay attention to category design, then it'll end up getting snacked by someone else, right?
You're going to get put in someone else's category. And then by definition, you're competing on their terms, not on yours. That's how it works. That's what Benioff did to Tom Siebel. He let himself, and Tom let himself get put in that. He let himself get put in the same bucket. And I want to tell you a story too. There's a company, so sometimes you talk about all these big companies we work with. I want to tell you one little, really quick story about a company called Clear Metal. 3 kids out of Stanford, all in their 20s, came to us and said that they had just raised, I think it was $200,000 or something like that. And they came to us and said, hey, look, we got this idea and we want you to help us. And we're like, okay, what's the idea? And the idea was AI for shipping. This is back in 2015, 2016. We're like, holy smokes, like, okay. And, you know, okay, no one else would have thought of that. You know, what do you, and we sort of went through it, and we took them on because we fell in love with a couple of the founders. Will and Diego were 2 of the greatest founders of all time. They're engineers. And so we said, well, is that what you really are? And then we got into it. And of course, it turned out they were in a new category called predictive logistics. That took 3 weeks. And I think it cost them $50,000 or something like that, which may sound big to some people, but it's small change relative to the result they ended up with, right? And so what I'm saying to you there is that don't be confused that, you know, because, you know, the examples we and I particularly use are these ones that are so well defined and so bigger outcomes. There's a lot in between, and there's a lot of smaller ones, and you can actually apply this at a much simplified version.
I actually think there you touched on something which I think is interesting in terms of the brand conversation we just had, because you also, it's your co-author that uses that terminology most, but he talks about languaging, which is branding without, you know, talking about yourself, right? I'd love to have you expand on that topic, and also how you think it applies, and come with some cool examples.
I think you should have Christopher Lockhead on your show to actually tell him yourself. I don't want to try and be him. First of all, I love him. He's a brother of mine, and we're the best of friends. And so, but I just love the way he's provocative. That's him and his style. His podcast is very much about language, and that's kind of his passion. I'd love to hear Christopher's answer to that rather than listen to it.
Because just to everyone listening in, because I think that's it. It's a bit what you said, right? You don't want to use his words, but it is languaging when you're saying, don't come and tell me you're doing AI for shipping. You know, use the right words, be concise. It's not just AI for shipping; it's predictive logistics.
Yes,
that is a complete different name to be giving it than just saying the other.
And that's category design right there, everyone. And this company, just tell the rest of that story. So the company Clear Metal, like I said, 3 kids, and we said, okay, lightning strike. What's the biggest logistics show in the world? Apparently there's one in Long Beach that's really big. It's like, okay, we're going to hijack that event. And they're like, what do you mean? It's like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go and get a booth there. We're going to get a keynote there, and we're going to spend a whole $25,000 on marketing. And we did it. And we went down there and we published a white paper on predictive logistics, this idea that you could actually track a container for at any point in time to know where it is in your supply chain, which means when's this shit going to show up in my store and start being sold, right? Like, it's that whole thing. Right. And we published this incredibly powerful white paper that Willie and co wrote, and put it on the chair of everyone who's going to be at the predictive logistics at the shipping show. And predictive logistics that day was born and became one of the hottest topics in all of the threads of the show, right? So they don't have to be these giant things. You just have to know that it was going to be a shipping show with all of the executives who do shipping. Get in front of them. You don't need to go, keywords and shit. Like, it doesn't have to be that hard, right?
And I think that makes a very good point in that just to emphasize to all the category design isn't instead of anything else. It's on top of everything. So here you said they went to category design bureau like you, and then they spent 50,000 with you, and 25,000 of that was marketing. So it doesn't mean that you don't do marketing. It actually means that you're just doing a very special type of marketing. So we've got another question, which is how do categories come to be? How are they created? And maybe also talk a bit about what does a company do when they kind of feel like they fit in 2 different categories or 5 different categories? How do you pick between the different categories that you might define for yourself?
Well, first of all, categories get designed by somebody. It's best when it's you. Because if someone puts you in the XYZ box, someone else will have already defined the RFP for that XYZ box. It's a rigged system, just like RFPs are. That's what you do, right? So it's best if you do it yourself, and it's best if you create it and create your own language. Predictive logistics, as an example, is one of those examples, right? The question of what category you could be in 5, I think that means the scope of your problem's too narrow. And let me say, it could be either way. Actually, the scope of the problem is mismatched to sort of the category is perhaps the better way to say that, right? And so Salesforce automation, as an example, how that evolved into CRM was an exact example of that, where the problem that you were talking about was the sales funnel, but the actual problem that Tom Siebel was talking about was customer relationships more broadly.
Yeah.
Right? And so that pairing of the scope of the problem, the category name, and then ultimately the solution is really important. And it's your job as a sort of a CEO and founder to try and articulate that as well as you can. I'll say one more thing, which is predictive logistics was right for Will and Diego at the time they founded the company. They then found that actually it was the Walmarts and the Best Buys and these large corporations who actually were the real users of their software, because they really cared about where containers were and when they were going to arrive in stores, much more than the shipping organizations, which were part of the solution. And they ended up redefining themselves 3 years later, and we helped them with that, with continuous delivery. This idea that you are continuously receiving stuff as a Walmart, and you need to know where it all is, and whether it's shipping, whether it's road, whether it's train, whatever form of transportation, right? And so the reason for just explaining that is that you just have to be right enough at the early stage to get yourself going. And then once you've got product market fit, once you've got sort of like a vertical, for example, then you can sort of take a breath and see whether or not the category still fits. Yeah. And then you can, in our particular case, we stepped it up to a higher level, which was this idea of continuous delivery.
And I'm also thinking that it's okay that whatever you're defining for yourself, when you're sitting there building your seed stage category, also has, that there are other players that would fit you inside their category blueprint and say that this is how you fit in their world. That's fine. That's their story. This is ours. And it'll always be like that. And it's just like a map. You have a map of Denmark, but you also have a European map where Denmark also fits. That doesn't make Denmark irrelevant.
Right. Yeah, I'd be interested in David's response to that too.
Yeah. I mean, something that I've been thinking about here is that I've been thinking about how your category can evolve over time. I think that's totally fine. And, I've also been thinking about how, like who the category is for, and I'm this, so this is more of a reflection and potentially a question. I'm curious for your thoughts, Al, which is, when you think of let's use the clear metal example, well, actually, I feel like maybe use another product like Salesforce maybe is a good example, or Airtable, except Airtable doesn't have a category, as we all know. So let's use Salesforce instead.
Yeah.
So yeah, exactly. You guys are, thank God you guys are on the case. Thinking about Salesforce. So, if the category is a cloud CRM, now I'm thinking about the usefulness of that from a go-to-market perspective, and like who actually, thinks about that category, who is that category important to? I can imagine that category is important to, a certain level of buyer, potentially. Maybe they're thinking about like, oh, I think that problem resonates with me, and I feel like I need a product that solves this problem. Okay, that's like, let me Google it. Let me figure out who are the leaders here, whatever. But what about, if what about the Salesforce admin, or like the end user? And with Airtable, it would be, yeah, there's a VP buying it maybe, but it's a bottoms up growth company, right? Like there's all these other people who've already started using the product. So I'm trying to like think about the value of category for because if I'm just like some random end user who started using Airtable, I'm not using it because somebody has talked to me about disconnected systems. That's probably not how I've come across it, right? I've probably come across it because of word of mouth or whatever else, and I'm playing around with it, and it's resonated with me. So I see the value at the top, but I'm trying to think about the value at the bottom, for bottoms up growth led companies. So I don't have the answer, actually. I'm curious if anybody else does.
I just posted something in the chat on Zoom, which would be maybe helpful for people. And we call it the CMO's Guide to Sticking the Category Design Landing. This is exactly the story you just talked about, which is you need the C-level story, you need the VP level story, and you need the actual user story. They're all derivative, of course, of disconnected systems, but they have different, if you like, pain points or different problems they're actually trying to solve.
Yeah.
Your job as a category designer is not only to solve the big one, experience gap, execution capacity, disconnected systems, but you also have to articulate these others, and that's about what a lot of what marketing has to do. You're absolutely spot on, Dave. Anyway, it's a great resource if you want to read it. I posted the link in the chat. There's other great. We have a blog section on PlayBigger which talks about lots of these different questions that are coming up. By all means, take a look, and that's our gift back. Hopefully, that as we learn more, that we share it back to the community.
Yeah. Al, we just have one final question that I do want to ask before we end. We've only got 4 minutes left, so sorry about that. But Jag is asking, I know Al that mentioned that he's writing a book. I think it's called Therapy. Yes, it is. Aimed at early stage founders. But until that book comes out, any quick tips on ways for early stage founders to start working with category design and naming their path? And then he comments, we often ask founders we're investing in to start by looking at their best performing ad copy, but curious if there are other quick and dirty tactics.
Yeah, I'd ask the founders what problem they solve. And if they can't answer it real fast, you've got a problem. Doesn't mean it's not going to be successful. Airtable's a great example, but it's going to help you sort of get at it. And if the answer that comes back is, well, we build the fastest, greatest, free-flowing carbidingulator in the world, he or she's talking about a product solution before they've got to the problem. And so as an investor, and we've got 60 investments here. We take equity in each one of our companies we work with. That's one of the questions we always poke at big time. And ad copy is like, that's how hopefully it's how you describe the problem in a way that appeals to David's point to somebody within the organization, and it captures their imagination. So that's one Cheat's way of looking at it for sure. What are the keywords are another example of sort of what are the areas that you're trying to own, if you like. That's another way of looking at it. And I'm sure David's got 10 tricks up his sleeve.
Yeah, I was going to say, something we often did at Airtable is we would ask I'll tell you what works, some things that work and some things that don't work. So we would often ask, our users to describe the problem that Airtable solved for them. And that was like the most useful for sure, was just hearing them play it back. The least useful was asking them to describe Airtable, like describe Airtable to their friends or something. That's how you get everybody saying spreadsheets on steroids. And it's a very frustrating experience. So that was never useful. There were no good ideas that came from that. But asking people to describe the problem they were solving was incredibly useful. For us, actually, it was like there was a meta takeaway because they would describe their problem, and the real takeaway from looking at all of the different problems that Airtable was solving, the real takeaway was there's so many different problems. And Airtable is empowering all of these people from all different companies, walks of life, functions, whatever, to solve all of these incredibly unique problems. That in and of itself is super interesting.
Yeah.
The fact that Airtable, like the long tail of problems that Airtable is solving, that's really interesting. That's unique. How can we try to bottle that up and talk about that?
Al, do you have any final comments?
I think this is a topic that you should, talk about. And, we have written one book, so it's a great resource. A lot of people have bought it and used it. And we see category designers all over the place. Internal category designers, as we call them, working inside. Product marketing tends to be the place where the hub that they most hang out at, because they seem to bridge both the problem solution, i.e. the sort of the marketing side as well as the sales side. And so, yeah, find your product marketer, get her or him, a copy of the book. We also got a bunch of other resources available on PlayBigger. And until we get version 2, let's keep talking.
I was just about to say that for sure, go visit PlayBigger because there's a lot of resources there. Everyone, thanks so much for joining us. Al, David, thanks so much for being the guys in the limelight tonight. That was awesome. Everyone, feel free to reach out. Also, join us in democratizing access to European VC. You can do that by going to the emerging VC, but more importantly, I think you should write directly to David and tell him that he should definitely open up access to Angular Ventures through a operated LP syndicate. So that's one for you, David. I hope you'll get a lot of spam out of this.
David at angularventures.com. Lay it on me.
I hope you'll get a lot of inbound now. Everyone, thanks so much. This was fun. Hope you guys thought it was worth a Monday or Tuesday night or whatever it is today. I've been sick for a week with the kids, so yeah, I have no idea what day it is anymore. So cool. Thanks so much. Take care, guys.